Welcome to the Epic Success Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Shannon Irvine. I'm wondering, have you ever thought, I want to write a book someday? Have you ever mused about what it would be like to be signing your books and people picking them up and reading them and it really impacting them? If you've had those type of daydreams, if you've really thought that your life story or something that's gone on for you would really be amazing in a book, or you just have that inner desire to write and you don't know why that's there, well, then today's podcast is an amazing podcast for you. My dear friend and mastermind cohort, Azul is with us. He's talking all about what makes a good writer, and what makes a good book, a good book. He is a book coach to some of the biggest out there, Pat Flynn, Malstaff, and many others. And today he is on the podcast telling you how to make that dream become a reality. So super excited to have him today. Let's jump right in. Here we go. Welcome to the Epic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Shannon Irvine. I hope you're having the most blessed day. Okay, this interview was a year in the making. It's crazy. This guy is busy. He's all over the world. But if you don't know my guest, if you're seeing us on video or if you haven't heard of him before, Azul is a fellow mastermind, a colleague of mine. He's also a very infamous TEDx speaker with over 1.4 million views on his TEDx talk about what makes a good teacher great. He has been the book coach to people, well-known people that you all love, like Pat Flynn, Jada Selzner, and many others. And he has a podcast called Born to Write. Azul, welcome to the podcast finally.
Thank you. I'm so honored. I'm glad. I've been wanting to just chat with you, and this is a great way to do it.
So Azul and I and his partner Steve, we're all in a same mastermind together. And I got to know him well over the last year. And this man is a genius at bringing out that inner story that we all have and pulling it out of us, and also putting it in a format that can be understandable, that can make impact, that actually create movements, much like Pat's Will It Fly created pretty much the whole smart passive income movement that we see for Pat. He does this for authors in his group coaching program and works with authors in his Authors That Lead brand. But Azul, I would love for you to take us back. What got you even interested in the whole art of being an author and writing and story? I know there's got to be something that sparked that in you originally.
Right. It's kind of a funny story in that before doing this, like we all have many lives, right?
Yes.
I was a school teacher and a principal and a university instructor. And I had always wanted to make my way out of teaching, which wasn't very popular with my peers. They would say things like, "Oh, you don't love children anymore." And I was like, well, it's not that. It's just that I'm looking to grow into something new. A couple of decades of this work. So I had started listening to people like Pat Flynn, who are talking about making this passive income online. It sounds like a good idea, but I had no idea what to do. And I followed many people and tried things that just didn't work for me, didn't seem to produce the result. So from my classroom, I saw that Pat posted on his Facebook group that he was offering these one-day business breakthroughs, or 20 entrepreneurs sit in a hot seat and get coached by him and Chris Ducker, his infamous best friend.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to buy this. And I didn't have much money. Steve and I were raising two teenagers at the time, and Steve was making transition out of his corporate career. So, it wasn't like we had tons of money to spend, but I spent this money to buy this one-day event, and then got the email about all the things you can do, to send your details, like your website, your email list, your current models of business. And Shannon, I didn't even have an idea for a business.
Right.
I didn't even know what I could write. I couldn't even make up stuff. So it was pretty much blank.
Aww.
And I just sent it back, I didn't have an idea. I didn't know what to say, but I did have this idea for a book I had been working on. And I said, you know what? I have about a month. I'm going to write this book. I'm going to show up with a book done. I'm just going to write it, plan it, map it out, and write. I'll write every day, and I'll post it on social that I'm writing so I can hold myself accountable.
Right.
And the day before I submitted my manuscript to the editor was the day before the event. So I went to the event with this book idea called The Art of Apprenticeship, and essentially how to find a mentor. That's what I was doing. I was trying to prove my point. Find a mentor that you can serve and get your way into another industry.
Right.
And so I stood up there in my hot seat and pitched my book idea, and that I had wrote it in 30 days, and that I've been sharing it on social, and that I was a teacher looking for a dream. And that's really where it started, because people came up to me afterwards and said, "Can you help me with my book?"
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But that's how it started. I wasn't that I had this wonderful idea. I was not an English major. I taught English, but it wasn't because I was good at English. It was because I happened to get a job teaching.
Right. You're like, okay, here we go.
I flunked out of freshman English in UCLA. I had to take it twice.
Oh, that's funny.
I didn't discover I was dyslexic until I was almost a senior in college. So I
Wow.
had a lot going against me that would say I shouldn't be involved in writing. But it was because I was so focused on story, which isn't valued in school. Story isn't. Writing is, but story isn't.
Yeah.
Um, that I really found that I was good at it. And it just happened to be some of my first clients were people like Dana Malstaff from Boss Mom,
Yeah.
at Flynn, John Broman from the Front Row Foundation, just people that were really influential that I was able to help. And I became quickly the person that could help those people. So that's how I fell into this.
I love that because you were just being you. You were being you. You weren't being, you had a dream, but you didn't even know what it was. I love this so much because
No idea.
I love that because it stops so many people. Well, like I have to have the 17-point business plan and I've got to be an authority and I've got to have all these things that aren't true. You just have to be you and put yourself out there like you did. But you had a natural bent towards story and you created this process that you've now taken these amazing human beings through. And full disclosure, Azul knows we're going to be starting to work at the 2020. We're going to start working on my book. So I cannot wait to work with him and his team on getting that out there and potentially a TEDx talk. Let's talk a little bit about how the heck you got on TEDx and the life that's added to your coaching business.
Yeah. So I never applied for TEDx. So it's kind of interesting that people ask me for help,
Yeah.
because I say, well, most people miss the point of TEDx. It's a simple point. It's an idea worth spreading. It's not good
Right.
speeches by great speakers. It's not that. And so many people think, well, I got to polish it. Even TED organizers, I think, miss this, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
And so what happened when I started to chase down this dream? I studied the Pat Flynn's of the world, Chris Gillibo. I started to really devour because he was himself. I felt like I knew him, even though I never met him. And I met him in person, and told him I want to be a writer someday. And that was 2013. And he gave me some great advice, which is just write every day. You'll be a writer if you just do that. That's what really helped me a lot. But then the TEDx came from a connection I made with a dear friend named Charlie Hohen. And Charlie is, I think he was infamously known as Tim Ferriss's first employee.
Yeah.
Basically, he hacked his way in the inner circle with Charlie. And when I say hack, that means he figured out what Tim needed to be successful. So I said, look, I don't know that I'll ever get to know Tim or need to, but Charlie knows everything about what he did. So I'll just learn from him. And I started studying in his mastermind, and we just became great friends. After our time together as working in mastermind, we just connected, and he recommended me to the TEDx in Santo Domingo, which is in the Dominican Republic. And I was living at the time coaching a school in Shanghai, China, which is pretty far away from Santo Domingo.
Yes.
And I spoke to the organizer for about 45 minutes. We chit-chatted, got to know each other. And he's like, hey, yeah, so Charlie said you have this idea for this TEDx. And that's all I had. I had an idea.
Yeah.
That's it. Nothing more. So it's sort of just like going to Pat's thing. I have an idea. He's like, well, what's your idea? I said, well, For 24 years, I asked the same question to students. I asked them what makes a good teacher great. And I recorded them and I kept them, and I have 26,000 responses to this question. And
Wow.
I'm kind of interested to share some of the most profound things that kids have said over the years.
Hmm.
He's like, huh, sounds good. You're in. I was like,
Wow.
okay. Didn't know what I was going to do. I had told this idea to a New York Times bestselling author. His name's Dan Rohn. He wrote the book called Back of the Napkin. A few weeks beforehand, he said, that'll be a best-selling book. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that's probably the worst thing he could have said to me, because I got in my mind, I has to be good.
Right.
That ruined everything. That book comes out in 2019, but it's been on pause since he said that to me, because the fear I had was that I wouldn't be good enough. And
Mm.
he introduced me to his agent. I mean, it was a big deal. He was like, yeah, this is a good idea. So I pitched that idea, and I worked on it with a proposal with a coach, and the book coach said, this isn't interesting. And I was crushed. So when I repitched this idea to that TED organizer, I decided I would change it slightly. And that's what I did the TED Talk on. I just made it more me and more what kids say, and not so much what I think about education. And it did really well.
Mm.
So that's basically how that came about. And I spent my time thinking about what would make this worthy of somebody else sharing or talking about it. And it wasn't my thinking or my ideas. It was my wonders and my faults and my failures, which is I never really listened to kids. That was the biggest problem. I was always maybe a good teacher, but I never was great. But if you listen to kids, you can be.
Wow. And so you embarked on that project in an effort to make you a better teacher.
Yeah, and it never. I wish it would have. I
Wow.
mean, my students, I always got way more from them than they gave to me, than I gave to them, because God, I think because I was school wasn't my thing, so I didn't get school the way most teachers probably did.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot from the kids. So
Wow. Wow. So we'll link that TEDx talk up so people can watch it, because especially if you're running any kind of front facing business online, or you're thinking about being an author, what makes a good teacher great from a child's perspective, from a student's perspective, I think those lessons must transfer over to what makes a great leader great. Yeah.
yeah, let's say if you're leading an organization, and I would tell this to principals or CEOs, hey, ask the people who work for you or under you, what would make what I do great? What would make me great in your eyes? And then just listen,
Mhm.
and do what they say. The biggest part is doing what they say. If they say, we think you should give us Fridays off, don't go, oh, that's nice. Sure. Do it. Even if
Right.
it's just an experience or an experiment.
Yeah.
Kids ask me to do things I never would have done. I was like, that doesn't make any logical sense to me. Like, but I would do it. And then I learned. The lesson was learned in the doing, not in the knowing.
Because we have all these judgments, right, that come up of what should and the
Mhm.
right and the wrong. But I'm assuming some of those things you learned that weren't the right things, but most of them probably were. Like, what would you say the breakdown was between what you experimented with that went amazingly well compared to that was like, maybe not?
You know what it was is that they were counterintuitive to what adults would do.
Yeah.
So they don't talk like adults.
Right.
Adults communicate specifically and how they want things to go. They use a lot of teacherese. But kids would say things like, a great teacher eats apples. And I would say, that's dumb. That's trite and cliche. It's not important. But I would see it again every year. Be like, someone write, a great teacher eats apples. I'm like, why are they saying this?
Right.
Like, why? If I had to pick anything in the world, why would they say this? So I ignored it for like a decade. I just didn't pay attention to it. I just thought I let them write 10 different things, and that was one of them, at least once a year. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. But one day I thought, you know what? This has happened so much. I'm just going to bring a bag of apples from Trader Joe's, and I'm going to eat apples all day long.
Mhm.
I started eating in the morning. I ate during class. I ate during break. I didn't even eat lunch. I just ate apples. It was really a lot of apples. And I just kept doing it. And kids would say, you're eating apples. I'm like, uh-huh. And I thought, well, that's fascinating. Why do they care? I never mentioned what I'm eating before. And then they bring me apples, and I just keep eating them. And it took a while, and I was like, oh, this is about them seeing that this is a relationship. It's reciprocal. That they bring gifts that represent goodness, and that I trust that relationship, and
Mm.
that I should realize its sacredness, and that if they bring me something, I should eat it. I should understand that it's a give and take relationship. But I don't think I would have gotten that unless I ate the apples, because eating apples didn't seem like it mattered or made much sense. But understanding the symbiotic relationship between teachers and students was really important for me to understand how much they were paying attention to that. But I didn't notice. I didn't notice before, not in the way that I did after that.
And it was all in the action, in the doing that the lessons were learned.
Yeah. Again, because kids don't speak like
Yeah.
adults. Another student, Danny, as you can imagine, every school or classroom had a class clown. This was Danny. Everything was funny, and every opportunity was a joke. He listed his things out, and actually they were pretty profound and pretty interesting. And I was like, one, it's kind of interesting he's being serious, except for there was one. It says, "The great teacher sings." I'm like, okay, Danny, here it is. Very funny, you know. So the next day I decided, you know what? I have to read the agenda and explain the homework and get them started. And I'm going to sing the entire thing. It takes me 2 or 3 minutes. I cleared my throat and I sang like the best opera singing, as serious as I could, as if I was good. And I wasn't, but I just sang with all my heart this entire, introduction to the class and the homework. And when I stopped, I figured Danny would point and laugh and everyone would join in, and at least the joke would be on me, and I wasn't planning for it.
Right.
But what happened was they erupted in a standing ovation and cheered like I was a rock star and was howling. And I was like befuddled, like, what is going on? And at the end of the class, they gave me high fives and handshakes. And Eric Manny, the last student in line, and he patted me on the shoulder and said, "I told you a great teacher sings." And then he walked out the door. And
Wow.
I was like, huh. I was like, they never see teachers take the risk we say kids should take, to put
Oh,
yourself humble and say, don't worry, trust us, we'll catch you. Put yourself out there, try something new. You don't need to know everything, just do it. But teachers don't do this. They don't show themselves as vulnerable and weak or need, or, you know,
wow.
in the position of where the power shifted. They had all the power. I was the one that was going to be exposed if they didn't let, like I had to trust them. But it was a huge shift in my understanding. I was like, wow, I don't give them enough credit. I don't take enough risks. I don't put myself out there enough. And that's what they want me to do. A great teacher sings is about vulnerability, but they don't know how to say those words. That's not what they're meaning, but
Right.
they really understand.
Wow. I just got goosies. So I'm curious, as you took this leap with the one day breakthrough with Chris and Pat, and as you put this book thing out there, and as this started kind of like taking a shape of its own, very authentic or original you, um, how do you see the parallels to what happens to authors? And I'm just hearing you speak, and I'm thinking that's exactly what so many of my colleagues that I know they're in the writing process or wanting to write. They're trying to sound like an author. They're trying to do authory things and speak authorese, and that isn't what people want to read, is it?
No, or we'd all go to the used uh, book section of a university and get textbooks and read those, and we don't.
Yeah,
We don't. We're not looking for more information.
yeah.
We're looking for transformation. And transactional books have a place, but they don't ever have a strong way of transforming people. So I think the biggest shift I've seen is that even with Pat, let's pick Pat Flynn. We're picking on Pat a little bit, but he's talked about this in
Yeah.
some interviews. So I'll let him talk to me about it later. But he essentially wanted to write like Malcolm Gladwell because he wanted to be seen as a serious writer, not a blogger, but a writer. And he did some writing, and it just wasn't him.
Right.
People want to know who you are and what you think and what you believe and what's your unique perspective, because chances are somebody else knows exactly what you know
Mhm.
content wise,
Yeah.
but no one can see the world and be uniquely you. And that's what's really hard to do, because it takes taking a stand and saying, look, this is what I got, this is what I believe, this is what I think, and it's got to be good enough.
Mm.
And it's really not our fault, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, we're trained to be
Yes.
editors.
Hmm.
The way we write, we're trained to be editors. So in school, we wrote and then we turned it in and we waited for the dreaded red mark and we got it back and we fixed what they said and turned it back in. We were trying
Yep.
to get the best grade we could.
Yep.
In college, you avoided, or high school, the paper until the night before. You did it because it was dreadful.
Right.
And you edited it to as close to getting a good grade as possible. You didn't think of like, will this matter? Does this make a difference to me? Do
Yeah.
I care? It wasn't what we were asked to do. And even when we write emails, we type, we edit, we type, we edit. We don't say, what's the most stirring thing I can put in this right now?
Yeah.
So we're trained to be editors, not creative people. And the world needs creatives. They need them to share their truth, not just knowledge, but in a way that brings yourself to the table. And that takes a sense of knowing and understanding. And that's what separates us from anyone else, because we can have the same business model, the same content, but what will make some people thrive and successful and others not is that people don't feel like they know, like, or trust you enough to buy in. So that's the hardest part about, I think, trusting that process is putting yourself out there. And that's a little bit about what I've learned from kids. It's like that's part of the magic sauce.
Mm. So how do you take a person who, and again, I echo, I say this all the time with my tribe, we don't learn how to think. We learn how to regurgitate and ask for permission. That's why we don't know how to train our thoughts. So you're
Yeah.
speaking my love language, because as much as I love education and went all the way to where I went, I had to untrain a lot of that. And
Right.
a lot of my clients need to untrain and actually start to even hear their thoughts, and so that they can create the life that they want. How do you work with authors to actually allow them to let go and truly start to trust that inner voice?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Mm.
Oftentimes, the biggest mistake authors make is when I ask them to tell me why I write this book, they tell me so much about the great readers and how it's going to help so many people. And I say, well, what is this book going to do for you? Oh, I don't even know. I haven't thought about that. I'm like, you're investing a whole lot of time and effort. You should really think about what you want this book to do for you. You've got to believe. If you don't believe this book is going to change you, transform you, then how do you expect it to change or transform anybody else? Like, just
Mm.
because it's information.
Yeah.
So, like, the shift in what a book's for is the first shift. Like, look, this is your transformational process to clarify your message, your thinking, your beliefs, and put it into the world. And before you do that, you're going to have to wrestle with the fact that you're going to have critics, zombies, vampires trying to take you down. That's always going to happen no matter what. Whether you pretend they happen or not, it's going to happen. And you're going to worry about, what if this isn't reviewed well? What if this isn't any good? What if it comes off wrong? And so most of writing is avoiding writing and not writing. So my job is first to shift their mindset around what writing is and what it isn't, and then how to remember their point and their purpose. If they don't have a strong enough why behind why they're doing it for themselves, they'll give every other reason to not cross the finish line. I think in 2008, New York Times posted a article that said that 81% of Americans say they have a book inside of them, but only 3% ever actually finish a manuscript.
Wow.
But of that 3%, only 30% ever actually hit publish, whether they submit it, get it published by someone else, or publish it themselves. So
Wow.
we're talking a fraction of 1%. I know in our world with successful entrepreneurs, everyone seems like they have a book, but the truth is the percentage of people who have a book is really, really small.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of courage and effort to get it across the finish line. And it's not permission we need anymore, at least not from others. It's to trust that we can do this and what we have to say matters. So a lot of my work, before I let them write, it's like 4 weeks into it before I make them let them touch any writing. And they're like dying to write. I'm like, this is the
Right.
thing that will make the difference if you focus on these fears and these blocks that we have before we write.
Yeah, I never, and it's funny because we haven't started the process yet, and I'm starting to think like, yeah, what is it? Why am I doing it? Like for me, like, cause we're so, at least a lot of us, and I know Pat is this way, so externally driven in terms of like impact and really what we want the message and the mission to get out. So, but anything that you do that's worthwhile, you have to go through it and become the person that becomes successful. You aren't successful to start. You have to become that person. And so it makes sense that in writing, it would be this cathartic aligning almost with that interior truth of who you really are and why the heck you would want to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Pat was a good example because it's really subtle because he was already successful monetarily and his blog and podcast. But the thing that most people don't realize, or at least don't pay attention to, is that Pat only was an affiliate marketer.
Right.
Never sold anything himself
Yeah.
besides the early books that he did, and he stopped doing that. He created the lead exam book early on, but then he hadn't created anything around the topic he was teaching in a long time.
Yeah.
So this was his first step into teaching and selling online anything. This book mattered a lot to him because he wanted this book to lead to a course, which can lead to other things. So it was a huge shift that, like, I'm not going to be just an affiliate marketer. I'm going to return to creating stuff that people buy, and I'm worthy. He, I don't know that he said it like that, but that was the transformation he needed to go through. What can I create that will make a course that I can start selling people, that it's my own? And Will It Fly was the first step towards that goal, that vision.
And it's so amazing to see now, just using that example, how that, like, it's like that ripple effect, or like that pebble in the water kind of thing, where now all these years later, we can see that it's being published in different languages and having that same kind of freeing experience in the lives of others, me being one of them, for sure. I mean, I started my podcast because of Pat creating that course, which wouldn't have happened had the book not happened. So isn't that
Right.
an interesting, like, ripple? But yet, had he not gone through that process of really owning it and leaning into it and then writing from that place, it wouldn't have been the same outcome, I don't think.
Right. And I know recently Pat and I discussed this, that his second book that he worked on, he tried to have somebody else write it for him because he was really busy, but he knew the talk. He had given it multiple times. It was successful, but they just couldn't find his voice. And
Mm,
the voice that he wanted, that playful, silly, honest, smart voice that Pat has.
yeah.
Um, and it's so funny that he really wanted to be the Malcolm Gladwell of online writers. And then now the funniest things that he does, the little comments he makes, the references to Back to the Future, all the things that people crave and appreciate about Pat.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
that's, but that's the point. Like, once you get clarity about who you are in anything, whether it be on a book or on a podcast or
Mm,
in life, you start to be able to do more you, just being, not doing, being. That's the part that's really difficult,
oh, it
at least
is.
for me.
But it's where the gold is. It really is where the gold is, you know? And it's what
Yeah.
makes us draw, like, it draws us toward the book. So that leads me to a question of what makes a good book great?
That's such a great question. I'm going to have to pose this to lots of people and see what I can collect. I got another 20 some years in me if I'm lucky. Um, most people say it's a book that can be remembered, a book that has impact on someone when they tell somebody else about it.
Mm,
That's the book that has impact. Because if your book is thought of like the conversation that you want to own, like if I only had 2 minutes in this elevator, or 5 minutes at the bus stop, or 5 hours on my couch, I want to own this conversation. I'm not going to tire of it because I believe it and care about it deeply. And if you have a minute to listen to me, whether it's the title that I share and it really makes you go, I'd like to read about it. I have to think about that. Or it's the 5 minute elevator pitch. I tell authors, if you can't say to, in line at a grocery store, say to the person behind you who's maybe your daughter's age, 8 years old, and say, this is what my book's about. And they go, oh, okay, I get it. Or the 99-year-old woman in line in front of you, what your book's about. And she goes, oh, I get it. Then you've probably missed the point.
mhm.
Books are conversation starters. They're not the whole conversation. But what do you want to stand for? What do you want to own? So great books to me are books that other people share and talk about more than the author's book inside. Because think about all the books that are on your shelf right now that you haven't finished, that you bought with good intentions, that you maybe
Yes.
even started, but you haven't finished.
Yeah.
And even though there are a few of those, there's books that people will talk about that they never finished, or they don't know tons about. But they'll talk about the tipping point. They'll
Hmm.
talk about all marketers are liars. They'll talk about books because the notion alone is enough worth talking about. And that's, to me, great books do that. They spark something in you to want to share it and spread it.
I love that. And one of the things, as you were talking, that dawned on me is I started like thinking like, what makes a book that I just won't part with them. And I've got a lot of them. My husband keeps saying, can we? I'm like, no, it doesn't go anywhere. Some of them are informational, like they help me with a process. So there's a place for that. But
Yeah.
the ones that are transformational for me are the ones that when I'm barely into them, I've transferred from their story to making it mine. Like I'm seeing myself in them, and I'm seeing now like through their lens of potential or possibility or shift or whatever the case may be. That probably is speaking to the genre I read mostly, but um, I love it when an author can either transport me or transform me to seeing some reality that I never knew existed or never fully believed could exist for me,
Right.
and to me, it's magical,
Yeah.
there's so much magic in books and in writing and the whole process. And of course, one of our colleagues in the mastermind, we're watching her and you're coaching her through the process. So it's so fun to watch that kind of unfold in front of us, too, as an observer. It's been really exciting for me to see how, like, in the process of learning the book or writing the book, you actually become more of who you are.
Yeah. It's
So
like giving yourself permission to be all the unique things you already are. Um, but you don't realize it. I mean,
mhm,
I don't think we pay attention to what makes us great. We just don't notice. I think a lot of it is because the things we know, we talk about on a very conscious level.
right.
Like I know a lot about the publishing world, but who I am and how I operate has to do with that subconscious level of knowing.
Yeah.
And so we don't think about that because we operate on that system. So we don't really think about why we're so great or unique. We just go, yeah, well, and if someone points it out, we acknowledge it, but we hardly think it's true. We just go, oh yeah, well maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but so my job is to slow them down and reflect, hold up the mirror and reflect with them. And I remember Ray Edwards, a different, when I was at a copywriting course of his said, Azul, you can't read the label from inside of the bottle. And that's part of the reason why we don't know how to say a book. We know we want to say, but we don't know how to say it. And that's because our operating system is sort of blinded from us. And I know, of course,
Oh
your
yeah.
whole audience knows a lot
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
both the positive and negatives.
Hmm.
And I tell people, part of your truth lives in the places that you've shined the most and had the most joy. And the distance between that and the moments that have been your lowest, that's usually where your greatness is. But we just don't notice because we're either sliding down to the bottom or crawling our way to the top. So we don't know what it is that makes us who we are.
Wow. Wow. That's good stuff. And it's just so applicable, even if you're not writing a book, like if you're an entrepreneur of any type, like this is the stuff that people are drawn toward. You
Mhm.
said it so well. Information now, it's a commodity. It's, even my process, even though it's proprietary, somebody can take it and teach it. They can't do it like I do it. you
Right.
know and then embracing that feels awkward because we've tried to fit in, and we've tried to stay within the norms and stand out the way society tells us to versus the way we really genuinely are. And yet some
Hmm.
of the most unique authors out there are the ones that lean into that. I didn't recognize it until you said it, but I'm like, yeah, that's exactly why I like them, because it's not what they're saying, it's who they are saying it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I never ever considered being a book coach until someone asked me, "Would you help me?" And I just, as a teacher at heart, said, "Yeah, of course I could help you. I could help anybody." I had
Right.
that belief because that's how I believe about people. That's my operating system.
Yeah.
Everyone's a great writer. And people are like, no, 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 everyone is. I go, yeah, you can believe that, but I've been a teacher. I know I can help anyone write. So it was on a default. But what was interesting is I never thought that a dyslexic who flunked freshman English, who doesn't have an English degree, doesn't even have, I have a teaching credential, but I don't have any degree in education, be the right person to teach people to write books. That doesn't seem right. But really, my truth is I help people find themselves through the writing process. It's the process that I help them through. I hold the space for them to see themselves
Mm.
so they can tell their story, write their message, write their truth.
Wow. And that work has such a legacy effect, which is something that I love about books, something that generations down, I think about As a Man Thinketh, or just some of the books that I still like treasure that were written so long ago, but that hold such truth because they came through an experience, not through a method,
Yeah.
and how Viktor Frankl's book has affected me, and it still
Yeah.
stays on my shelf because it's like, wow, the human spirit can go through so much yet be so resilient, and leaves me with that feeling of like, gosh, if you can survive that, like I have no problem. Like I have no problems, right? I'm
Right.
capable. And I'm curious as we start to wrap up, now that you've worked with so many amazing authors and you're coaching in a group setting, which is an amazing thing. I love this. Authors who lead movement that you've got started now. What, in your opinion now, makes a good author a great author?
I think that they're willing to be vulnerable, putting their truth out there and to exclude people.
Mm,
The biggest fears for people that I record at all these applications, the hundreds I've received, is they don't want to look stupid or be
right.
misunderstood or fear that they didn't get it right. And great authors have to put that aside, and great books exclude more people than they include.
Mm,
And that's really difficult. So, because you don't want to feel like you're pushing people away, but
right.
that's the only way to attract the right people. And so great authors know that and they stand for something. And to do that, you have to accept the fact that you're going to be criticized and maybe not appreciated. And you can't say, you're not the one that gets to decide this is a great book. That's left for others. The only thing you can do is write your truth, write what you know, write the best parts of you on there. And I hope people disagree with me. And that's how I push people away. Is
Yeah.
that's my message. I believe books are transformational, not transactional. I don't help Lambros try to get a calling card to make more money. It's just not who I attract, because I believe that the process is just as valuable as the content they write. So my job is to get clear about that. And that's really hard for authors, is to say, I'm willing to exclude people for this message, for this truth. So I think great books do that. And that's something the great authors are always focused on, is how to make sure that they're talking to the right person when they're writing their story, their truth, or their message.
Wow. I am inspired and shifted from this interview, Azul. Not surprised at all, because that seems to happen around you. Another one of your talents that you have that I've got to see over the last year. But tell my listeners, even if you're, and it's funny because I do get this question a lot, like, if I was going to write a book, where would I start? And so I would love you to answer that question and then let people know how they can reach out to you. Of course, they should go, because you're listening to us on the podcast, you should go and click on the show notes where his Born to Write link is for his podcast. You'll learn a ton there. It's an amazing podcast. But I'd love for you to let us know that, and let us know how they can connect with you. How can they get involved with your group coaching so that they can start to get their message out?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. If you go to authorswholead.com, you can go there and you'll be able to get more access to our group programs about how we help authors write their books in less time than they think. Most authors think it takes a long time, years to write a book. And the truth is, I thought that too. It took 24 years to think about a book and only 30 days to write it, mainly because I had to release some blocks. Yeah, you can learn more about me at coachazul.com. And as always, if they wanted to join us on any of the social, you can find me at Coach Azul. And yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I want people to know that, guys, you don't need a coach to start writing a book. You just need the commitment to yourself.
I love it. The commitment first. But Azul, thank you again. Just your way of putting out the truth that comes out in these books, through your authors, and taking people through that process I do believe it's a legacy work, and it's something that, like you said, 80% of us think we have that message. And if it's been bugging you and like it's still coming up like it was for me, Azul's like, okay, so when we're getting started. And so
Yeah.
2020 is that year for me. And I'm super excited about what's being even like stirred in me as I'm talking to Azul here for you. And so if a book is something you're thinking about, or you're even just thinking about like, how do I even get to that inner core of who I am, whether I have a message or not, I'd really encourage you to reach out, check him out, and start to really get your truth out there into the world, because honestly, the world needs what you have. In fact, I truly believe, and I know Azul, we hold this belief that there are people that can only hear a certain message through a certain author and the way their life experiences has brought it to life. So thanks for being with us today. You are such a treasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Every moment of it.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you, Azul. You are fantastic. And this is something that's super important. I just, if we were talking while you were listening to the podcast, that it really kind of lit you up, like you were getting those butterflies in your stomach and you're saying, oh my gosh, I think I really want to do this, then I'm of course going to encourage you to listen to that voice and to start to take the steps that Azul talked about today in the podcast and really get a plan together and start the writing process now. Another great book that Azul and I talked about, what we didn't talk about in the podcast, is called The War of Art. If you haven't read that and you're an aspiring author, grab that and make sure you have a highlighter and a pencil, because you're going to be taking a lot of notes. But I'm excited for you to get going on this journey of writing a book and being an author and putting that voice out there that only you have. Love being with you today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Just hit the subscribe button and even hit that little bell so that you get a little announcement every time we go live every single week on Wednesday, where you get the podcast. And I would love it if you haven't done it already to write a review and share it with me on socials. Tag me at Dr. Shannon Irvine, do a little screenshot and show me the review, and I definitely will want to share you with my audience. All right, that's it for this week. See you next week. Bye for now.